But thank you everyone for joining. It's really great to see you all. I should probably share my screen, no? Um, yeah, it's absolutely great to see everyone, and great to see some old friends that I haven't seen in a while, or some friends from long ago that I haven't seen in a while, since we're not old. And I'm very excited to present today. I wanted to come up with a title that was going to capture some attention, and really the genesis for this presentation has been really my participation in a lot of the past events that the UX group has had, but also the Product Calgary group has had. So if you guys aren't familiar with the Product Calgary group, it's another great meetup, another great professional organization like this one. But one thing that I found was that a lot of the discussion was really around consumer-facing technology. And that makes up, a large portion of the technology ecosystem that is out there, but it doesn't cover other stuff that isn't so readily available to the average person. So what I wanted to do today was really get into some stuff that I've been working on for the last probably about 15 to 20 years, and give you a perspective on UX, and specifically around human factors that you might not think about in your day-to-day working on what I assume is primarily consumer-facing technology, or even B2B technology. We're going to be doing a lot of discussion in this session. I'm going to be making I'm going to do two things. The title, it was not just to capture your attention, it is a precursor of what's to come. I will tell you some more stories. I will make some controversial statements, and hopefully I will rile up this group and we'll get some heated debate. Not too long, because we've got a lot of stuff to go through on some of these statements. But let me start with just really quickly. My career journey started back in 1992 working in a restaurant, where I learned all about serving people. I spent time working in the university creating prototype software for things like software project resource management and all of that stuff. And I transitioned into oil and gas, and I spent 6 years there. But really 15 years of my career were spent in mission and life critical systems. And I've had the pleasure of working on those systems with a lot of the people on this call today. I spent 5 years working on radiology software with a company called McKesson. Then I went over to General Dynamics, and we worked on military command control and communication software and hardware as well. Then I went over to Smart Technologies, and while we weren't doing mission or life critical systems at Smart, our stuff, our smart boards, were used in scenarios where it was mission and life critical, and I'm going to tell you about one of those today. Then I transitioned over to Curve Dental, where we worked on practice management software, which was used for managing dental practices across North America. And while you might say, well, the dentist is not life critical, I would argue otherwise. As Stephen, who is on this call, will remember, we had an incident at Curve where our technology wasn't working so well one day, and we got a nasty phone call from a surgeon that had a toddler sedated on a table using our technology to see their x-rays when we went down. So even though we're not always mission life critical, there will be scenarios that are emergency scenarios, high risk scenarios where our technology is used. So just to talk a bit about the goals for today, what I hope to achieve, I want to introduce you to some of these technologies. I think for a lot of people on the call, you may not be exposed to this kind of stuff. I'm going to expose you to some scenarios that you're not likely to encounter in your day-to-day, and honestly, I hope you never encounter. I'm going to talk a little bit about the mental, physical, and emotional tolls that a lot of our users would be under when they're making their critical decisions. And I want to share some experiences that I personally have had that really opened my eyes to the importance of human factors in design. If that wasn't enough, we're going to get into a couple of things that I really want you to see, that you already know how to do all of this stuff. You could be designing software for mission life critical systems. You have all the skill set, but I think you need to take that skill set and think a little bit differently about what it is that you're doing. Lastly, last two things here, I want to challenge a little bit of what you have been taught to be true and what you know to be true. And by doing that, I want to leave you with more questions than answers. I want you to walk away from this session really questioning the things that you do on a daily basis, questioning your design process and your design patterns that you apply on a daily basis. And when that's done, there won't be a quiz, but I will give you homework, and I expect you to do it. I won't be the one that grades you on it, but the users that use your technology will be. All right? Okay, so let's just start really quickly. Just a quick overview of some mission and life critical technology that I personally have worked on. I want to give you a little bit of the characteristics of what that is. So first of all, what does it mean to be mission critical or life critical? The thing I want you to notice about these two definitions is that they are based on the failure of the system, not on the success of the system. When we talk about mission critical and life critical situations, those situations, their success is largely dependent not on your technology, but on the people that are in that scenario. Technology is there to support those people in their decision-making process, not to replace them. And that support needs to be solid. When it fails, it can have very serious impacts for the business, the organization, or the people involved. Those impacts can be security related, environmental, and most of all, life and death. So a mission critical system is really about something that a business or organization needs to survive. It has potential safety, environmental, and life consequences. And a life critical system, the easiest definition of that, if it fails, it can really hurt somebody or it can kill them. Right? So some of the ones that I've worked on, like I talked about at Curve Dental, we worked on practice management software. So that's a category of software under what is often considered mission critical. The goal of this software was to provide all of the tools needed for all of the staff in a dental practice. There are many kinds of dental practices and clinics. Some are your traditional hygiene where you go in, you get your cleaning done. Others are surgical practices where you go in and you get reconstructive surgery done. And we were able to provide tools that cater to that entire market. Some of the characteristics of these tools is that they have something for everybody involved in that entire end-to-end patient care process. So from the perspective of getting the patient in the door, to delivering the clinical services, to managing all of the administrative things that are needed to get the staff working, to finally billing and collecting for those services. Some things that come into the clinical space for our software, why it was often life critical, was that we were dealing with x-rays in a surgical environment where patients were sedated, like the story I told you about the toddler who was sedated in the operating room when our system went down. I spent 5 years, and actually Mike Rounding came and worked with me over at McKesson, and we worked on enterprise radiology PACS. And PACS is a component within the technology used in a hospital that stands for Picture Archiving and Communication System. And in a hospital environment, imaging is a critical tool used by clinicians to help diagnose and treat patient illnesses, right? Many of you will have had an x-ray done, a CT, an MRI. If you haven't, that's wonderful. I hope you never have to have one, because you never need one unless something could be potentially wrong. These images are used for critical care diagnoses. They're used for surgery planning. They are used during surgery. And there are even imaging types that happen that enable surgical procedures. So interventional radiology is the category. You may get ultrasound that is happening while they're injecting a scope into the heart, or an MRI that happens while they are injecting surgical tools through the arteries. This type of system is used in the highest risk scenarios in the operating room and in the emergency room. And I'm going to be telling you a story that I personally experienced that really changed the way I think about software. The other thing about PACS that's interesting in a mission and life critical situation is that it's not just used in one place. If you think about hospitals you've been to, they are large. They have many departments, many different clinics within a hospital. PACS and tools like it are used throughout the hospital. I personally have made stuff for the radiology room, the emergency room, the operating room, the various consulting rooms throughout large regional hospital environments that all needed to talk to each other. So really the goal of this technology is to give radiologists the tools that they need to diagnose illness, and most importantly, communicate that diagnosis and their recommendations to everyone else that's involved in the patient care, no matter where that patient is, whether they're in the hospital or outside of the hospital. If you've gone for an x-ray, the report that the radiologist creates goes to your family doctor, right? And lastly, command, control, and communication systems. And Kristen, who is on the call, I had the pleasure of working with her at General Dynamics. We worked on a number of things while we were working together. Specifically, I was involved in working on the cockpit displays for the CH-148 Cyclone maritime helicopters for the Canadian Navy. These images, this is the actual helicopter I got to work on. None of these other images are the internals of any of these vehicles for security reasons, but they are representative of the type of things that I was working on. We'll talk a bit more about that. What these things are used for is gathering critical information and disseminating that information to everybody who has to make a life or death decision and take action on the situation that they find themselves in. The definition is in the name, situational awareness. In a combat situation, in an emergency situation, in a support situation, that situation is highly fluid. It changes by the second, and these systems are meant to be providing the most up-to-date information that anyone has in order to inform the people on the ground who are the ones taking those actions. What's interesting about these is that they are generally used on the move. They're rarely in an office environment, right? They're in a military vehicle, they're in high vibration environments. This helicopter, when those rotors are spinning, it does this, right? And they're moving along and they're flying over things where if they crash, they die. And they have to be able to use the technology, and they have to process the information they're getting and communicate more information back. So some core characteristics, and I've highlighted a few in bold here that I really want you to latch onto, because these are, I think, where the parallels between mission and life critical systems can start to apply to some of your B2B or consumer facing technology. First of all, a lot of these systems are used 8 or more hours a day by the same person sitting in front of it for 8 or more hours a day. Imagine a soldier in a light armored vehicle, we're going to talk about that in a bit, who has been in that vehicle for 3 days, roaming around the desert, taking action on the thing that they need to, and processing and disseminating information that they come across. Rarely are these used at a desk. They're always used while they're doing something else physically, right? So they're walking, they're carrying something, they're running, or they're hunched over a patient, right? A dentist is hunched over your mouth doing what they need to do, looking at the screen across the room. And the most important thing, and this is maybe one of the biggest takeaways that I want everybody to get from this presentation, is that these technologies and your technology that you're making never, and I mean never, has the user's full focus. The user is always at all times thinking about something else, having to do something else, interrupted by something else. And in a mission and life critical system, actually the technology is always second, third, or fourth in their mind. It's never top of mind. You know, these can be used outside and day or night, etc. The other thing that I really want you to take away from this, and this is where we're going to spend most of the time on the discussion, is that these things are used under extreme emotional, mental, and physical stress. Doctors in an operating room, in an emergency room, we have all heard over the news over the last 18 months, the stress that our first responders and our doctors have experienced due to the COVID pandemic. When these people tell you that they are stressed, we need to be listening, because they are trained from day one to handle stress and handle it really well. And when they're getting overwhelmed, a situation is serious. We need to keep that in mind as technology providers, understanding that these guys, they're tired all the time, right? They're stressed all the time. And I'm going to show you that so are your users. Another one that is a real characteristic of a lot of these systems, which is maybe different from consumer technology, is that these are used by teams of people, not always individuals, right? So when you're working on practice management software, for example, it's used by everybody in the clinic. They're all starting tasks together, or someone is picking up a task and continuing where somebody else left off, right? That's very common in a hospital environment. In a situational awareness situation, in a command, control, and communication environment, you have tactical officers and sensory officers and sensors on the ground and soldiers on the ground, all of whom are relying on these technologies to be communicating to all of them, and all of whom contribute and consume information in that environment, right? So I am going to pause there before we get into a couple scenarios and just see, survey the floor if there's any questions, Eloisa, that we should address.
No, nobody has posted any questions, so I don't know, anyone wants to raise a hand or send me a question and I can make it for you guys.
Yeah, and I'll encourage folks, if you have questions as we go along, please post them in the chat. Eloisa is monitoring the chat for any questions that come through, and we can pause at any time and we can discuss. And if not, I'm going to carry on. All right. So I want to paint a picture now. We've talked a bit about, like, what are some of these technologies? What is the physical and mental state? Everyone's tired, but I want to see if I can make you feel that. So let's get into this. And I'm going to give a disclaimer here. I'm going to show a couple videos. Some of these contain what's considered sensitive content. One depicts a real life military scenario. It's not a movie. It's the real deal, recorded by some soldiers in the field. I'm going to discuss a scenario that supports them. I've made that scenario up just so we can get the discussion going. And there is a medical scenario in here as well that may be sensitive for some viewers. So viewer discretion is advised. This will take a few minutes. If you don't think you'll be able to take it, I won't be offended if you hop out and hop back in or do whatever you need to do. But really, I just want to set the stage for some stuff coming up here. So situational awareness and command and control. What we're seeing here on screen is an image of what is actually a US vehicle here, where we have a soldier that is interacting with situational awareness software. So there's a map on it, and that person is interacting with it. That software is meant to, like I said, collect and disseminate information in real time of what's going on in the situation that they're in. On the right, we have a headquarters or a forward operating base where we have a number of different officers, typical, usually information officers, tactical officers, et cetera, who are collecting information from everybody out in the field, from everybody anywhere that has information about what's going on, synthesizing it, entering it into the software, communicating it either via the software, via the radio, via verbal communication directly to other people in any way that they need to coordinate the people that are going to take action, right? These people are listening to the soldiers that I'm about to show you. And what's going to happen is these guys here, this is the light armored vehicle, the Canadian LAV 3. It's a personnel carrier, a fighting vehicle, a utility vehicle, a support vehicle. It does many, many jobs in the military. I'm going to play this really quickly just so you get a sense of what this vehicle is. There's no audio, so let's not worry about it. So these people are in the turret. They're coming along. It does fight. It's got a gun. It protects the troops that are in it, and it takes the troops to the place where they need to do what they do, right? So these guys are the guys that show up when this happens. Oops. So here we go. This is a real life scenario. These are US soldiers. They are pinned down in a fight. They're calling for artillery support because they can't actually get to the hostiles. They can't move, they're pinned down, right? So if they move, they could die. They're going to be on the radio calling for artillery support. That call is going here, oops, to these guys, and they will coordinate the platoon showing up in the light armored vehicles, okay? Here we go.
That was close. Yeah. 20 to 48. Yeah, looking down. Stay low. Come on, stay low. Come close to me. What are the actions for? Move. Move. Get down. No side fire, Fox 6 Fox taking fire from vicinity. LZ, HLZ, rock cut. Under fire and kilo code 33111 over. Yeah. Claymore. Hey, Claymore. Claymore going out. Hey, man, 3 points. Hey, I'm gonna start standing 40, Mike. 40, Mike, going out! Roger, they are no longer at HLZ Rock Redwood. GPS.
So what happened? These guys were being shot at. They called in for support. They provided information. Then somebody responded and they said they are no longer at blah, blah, blah. That video was about 1.5 minutes. The situation changed significantly in that 1.5 minutes. Artillery support is basically big guns that shoot big bullets at wide areas. Had they not let the HQ know that the hostile had moved and the artillery support had come in, it would have been ineffective. It was 1.5 minutes. So I want to start a little bit of discussion here, and I encourage people to just chime in. And I have an open question. Watching that scenario, think of the people that are in the Lab 3 on the situational awareness system and in HQ on their situational awareness system. What are those people thinking about? Anyway.
Am I going to die?
Yeah. What else?
How do I get to these people?
How do I get to these people? What else?
What if I do something by mistake?
What if I do something by mistake? What else?
Be feeling frustrated or impatient due to the speed of things happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. They need me now. I'm not there. Right. So let me ask this question. What are they not thinking about?
Where's the OK button?
Where's the OK button? That's right, Mike. It's almost like you know me. They're not thinking about technology. They're not thinking about the computer screen in front of them. They're not thinking about the keyboard. They are thinking about their friends. They are thinking about their training. They are thinking about what they need to do to support these guys and bring them home safely. That is it. What they don't have time to think about is where's the OK button? How many clicks do I have to do this? Do I remember how to use this screen? In that minute and a half, that situation changed so much that any interruption by this technology could actually have caused those guys to pass away. Right? So let's move on to another scenario. Before we do that, let's talk about situational awareness technology and some things about that I think maybe you can take away to your technology as well. If you understand that your users are in a situation that changes fluidly, these are some things that you can think about in your design patterns that can help. And how do they help? They help by eliminating unnecessary UI that could get in the way of them doing their job. It's really that simple. So in these situations, like I said, these guys have to be able to synthesize the information coming in, right? The guy in the lab on the situational awareness or the guy on the other end of the line in the HQ heard hostiles at this location, then hostiles no longer at this location, right? So they need to be able to synthesize that, put it in, distribute it, communicate it, do it quickly. And how do they do that? Well, if you look at the software in front of them, there's not a lot of buttons. We've minimized the UI. It's all map. And on that map is information, and it's minimal information. It's not volumes and volumes of information. It is just what is critical for them to understand. So in the scenario that we talked about, there would be a red dot and a blue dot. The red dot is the hostile, the blue dot is the friendly, and they are at a location on the map. There would be a couple critical pieces of information about each of those and some orders that go with it, right? The information is maximized. Everything is distilled down to exactly what is critical for the person to do their job. Tasks are really short, 3 clicks maximum. If you can do it in 1, even better. If you can do it in none, even better, right? The simplest language possible is used. When you're in that situation, if you listened to the words they were using, they weren't long sentences. It wasn't, hey, Louise, can you please pass me the GPS so I can communicate our coordinates to the da-da-da? There is a language that they use, they speak it, it's short, it's concise, and it's understood, and it's most importantly, fast. If you actually ever get the chance to hear military radio communications, it sounds very similar to screen readers that visually impaired users use to read out what's on the screen. I can't remember, maybe Kristen, you know this number, but it's like, I don't know, 40, 50, 60, 70 words per minute. It's extremely fast. And that's what happens in military communications as well. If new information comes up, you have to alert the user, and that alert has to grab their attention. There's a lot of gunfire going on. There's a lot of bright light. You don't have their attention. So when a new piece of information comes up, it has to be prominently displayed, and it has to stay there until the person who's intended to get it, gets it, and confirms it. Make sense? All right. Next scenario. This is an emergency room trauma center. These are YouTube videos. If you guys are interested in these I found these on YouTube. There's lots of this stuff out there. That we're going to do the same thing. What are these folks thinking about? This is a trauma center in Pittsburgh, I think.
1, 2, 3. Hi, Lauren. I start touching some of the residents and help take care of you today. All right, we got a lot of things going to happen real fast here, okay? A lot of people are going to be taking care of you. Keep those big breaths in and out from you.
When the trauma comes to the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, we are always ready to do everything that we can to take care of that child.
Squeeze my finger as hard as you can, both sides.
The Trauma Center of the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia treats more than 1,000 trauma cases each year, many referred from emergency rooms throughout the region.
Trauma across the board is a very common reason for a child to come to an emergency room.
Is that press on your back? I need you to tell me yes or no if it hurts. That's all you gotta say. 1, 2, 3.
We see children from a lot of different injuries, from riding their bike to motor vehicle crashes.
Okay, everybody ready? 1, 2.
And we're going to pause it there because some of it gets a little more graphic. So same thing. What are these doctors thinking about?
Diagnosis.
Diagnosis. Oh, hey, Jeff.
They're trying to separate what I need to do from keeping the patient calm. They're trying to think of both of those things at the same time. How do I do what I need and get the person to help me doing it?
Yep. What is the number one thing on their mind?
The patient's life.
Sorry?
Go ahead. Saving a life.
Saving a life. It's the patient. It's the patient. It's that simple. What does this person need to be okay? Right? And what do I need to do so that they are okay? Again, not thinking about technology, right? But one thing I do want to point out in this video, and I'm just going to forward it here. Let me find a spot that shows it well. Yeah, maybe this one here. Get rid of this. Look at how crowded these people are and the limited space that they have to help this person. This is the environment that they work in. This person is hunched over this patient. They lifted the patient carefully, right? They didn't jerk the patient over. They had to use all of their body and their muscles to get this person into the right position. And they do this 24 hours a day. A resident in an ER in the United States is required to work 24 to 48 hour shifts. The physical toll, never mind mental and emotional, the physical toll is astronomical on these folks, okay? So that's something that I want to point out as a characteristic of some of these technologies. Come on now. Sorry, I am about some of these technologies. We talked, in the soldier sense, right? What they're not thinking about technology and so on. But I want to, this may sound like it's coming out of left field, but I want to talk just a little bit about the physical toll that our technology imposes or can impose on people. And again, I'll call Kristen out. This is something she understands very well. Kristen has a phenomenal background in human factors. And one of the things that we focused on at General Dynamics was, how do you avoid physical injury when you require someone to sit in a chair in a moving vehicle 8, 12, 34, 72 hours working at a computer? So I just want to give you one more video here. This is a radiology reading room. This is the type of environment that supports the ER. This is another one in an ER and a trauma center. And it's a time lapse of how these people work. So very similar. It's like an office environment, just a bit darker. You got these guys sitting in these chairs. Their posture is terrible, but look, their hand is on the mouse. Hand on the mouse, hand on the mouse, hand on the mouse. We all work in an office environment, and some of us have been working in our homes for the last, 2 years, right? We may not have the best ergonomics. Our hands are on the mouse, our hands are on the keyboard. In radiology, these guys spend their 8 to 12 hour day working in 1 to 5 minute increments on what's called a study, right? So a study is a set of images that is taken of a patient that is meant to be used for diagnosis. Just turning my fan up, it's getting warm in my room here. So just to give you a sense, this is what a CT scan of the upper torso looks like, and you see how they're scrolling through the anatomy, right? So they're going through the heart, through the lungs, etc. These images are taken as cubes. So they're taken as slices going through the body, right? So going right through, taking slices. So then they get a cube of images. or a stack, as they call them. Those slices can be taken anywhere from 1/4 of a millimeter to 5 millimeters thick. More modern technology is even thinner. And by law, at least in the United States, a radiologist is required to view every image that's taken. If we take the adult heart as an example, the adult heart is on average about 12 millimeters tall. At 1/4 of a millimeter slice, that's 480 images that they have to look at. And they have to look at it laterally, in sagittal view and in coronal view, right? So 2 to 3 times they have to look at it in different directions. And when they're using 3D, they're using even more images. So a full body CT can have upwards of 10,000 images that they have to go through many times. But they're sitting down, right? They're in a comfy chair, they're okay. One of the hidden physical impacts that our technology can impose on people is RSI. Repetitive stress injury, right? Yeah, and Mike's doing this. A lot of us will have experienced it, but in clinical situations, RSI is incredibly common, as is a bad back, as are bad ankles, bad elbows, bad joints, you name it. Imagine using your scroll wheel doing this 12 hours a day, nonstop. So the takeaway I want you to think about here is, if your user is meant to be in front of your technology for more than a couple minutes at a time, are you forcing undue physical strain on them by putting one button over here and one button over there? Can you use your design to minimize the amount of interaction that a user needs to have with your technology, and minimize the amount of motion, or even maybe change the motion that they do throughout the day to help them avoid this physical strain? That's just kind of a random nugget, but it's something I wanted to highlight in any of these systems, because I don't think that it's something that we generally think of. What is the physical toll of this person sitting in front of my technology for however long they have to do it? So I think that's a great place to pause and open up the floor to questions and discussion. And I see that there were some things in the chat, right?
I have a few questions. Well, first is a comment that you are a very good storyteller, that everybody's in the edge of the chair. So it's very hard to think of questions because they're just listening all your, so that's good. So one question is, how do you decide in a critical situation what constitutes an alert?
Yeah, so who asked that question? Maybe you can elaborate on that question.
You know who did it? Mike.
Mike Rounding.
Yeah.
How do I decide as a designer, Mike? Is that the question?
As a user, I guess. I don't go, Mike.
I guess you can interpret the question anyway. Like, you as a designer of the software need to be able to populate the system with alerts that are relevant and are actually considered alerts by the intended user. But in situations that are developing so quickly, like that military situation that you were showing there, how do you as the designer figure out what constitutes an alert? What do I actually need to interrupt them with?
Yeah, great question. So the simple answer is that you don't. You, in conjunction with your design team, which involves the user, in these situations, your design team, and I'm going to use design team as a term to refer to the designer, the users, the stakeholders, the people that are influencing the design, who should be primarily our users, right? Well, in a situation, so one of the things we're going to be talking about later on is training. Soldiers, doctors, etc., they're all trained to do their jobs, right? They are trained by trainers. Those trainers have developed training material for these scenarios based on their own experience. So really think of not just your user and talking to them, expand your reach outside of the user to the people that got them there, their trainers, their teachers, their collaborators, etc. Talk to them and ask them what is critical, because your user might go, look, I only need the GPS coordinates now. But remember, it's a team of users, right? So those guys that were pinned down, there were soldiers, there was a communications guy on there, he was the radio guy. There was a potentially an intel officer with there's all sorts of people. They have different roles to play. Make sure that you talk to all of them about what they think is critical, right? And then verify, validate, and test.
Good. So I have another question as well from Mike Ronding. In the video of the trauma, how much do they think about what technology do I have available to me and how do these relate to helping this person?
Can we save that question for a little bit later?
Sure.
Because I think it's very tightly related to a point I want to make here. And it's an excellent question. I'm really glad it was asked. So I think it was also from Mike. Mike, remember to bring that up again, please.
Yeah, and that's all I have.
Okay. So let's just talk a little bit about doctors, nurses, and soldiers, right? In these situations, there's more than just these people. Under these big labels are subcategories of people. But for those of you that have worked with me, you already know the answer to this question. So save it. I want to see what other people think. So a little bit about them. Now that we have a sense of what they feel and so on, let's take a look at what they're required to do. And I make this, and this may be my first controversial statement. Doctors, nurses, soldiers have exactly the same job. They do exactly the same thing, and they are trained for one and only one thing. All of their training, all of their schooling is for one purpose and one purpose alone. It is not saving lives. What do you think it is?
Solving problems.
So someone says damage control, solving problems. Yes. But it's not the most important one. Those are the end results of what they're trained for.
Okay, responding to a situation.
Responding to a situation, maybe. Okay, here it is.
I was going to guess.
Go ahead, Kristen.
No, you can go.
Survive, absolutely.
I was going to say process information.
Yeah, definitely. But they do that in order to be right. Everything that they are trained for boils down to these two words: be right. Am I going to shoot that guy? Is he trying to kill me? I better be right. Am I going to cut here to save this patient? I better be right. Everything they do is about decision making. And that decision making has to be the right decision or else. So in order to do that, they require information. It has to be accurate, up to date, reliable, complete, all of that. They'll make a split-second decision, which has life and death consequences, and they're going to rely on those around them for support in that decision. But those around them also have to be right. One wrong piece of information in the chain could break the whole chain. And they have to do that under immense emotional, physical, and mental stress. So the next thing we're going to look at is, how do you design for that? How do you really deal with that? But I want to make this point here. Doctors, nurses, soldiers, first responders, all of these people are not the only ones that have to be right. Right? Our leaders in our businesses that we work for, they also have to be right. They have to make the right decision for the people around them, the right decision for the business. We have to make the right decision for our users. any business or organization, the Calgary UX group, Luis and Eloisa and the organizers, they're making the right decision for what they think the community needs. That's what we do. We make information technology, all of us. And the whole point of everything that we do is giving a person the information that they need in that moment to make the right decision, right? Banking software. What information do I need to pay the phone bill and pay the phone bill to the right carrier, to the right provider, right? In a very simple thing, right? Food delivery. I want pad thai delivered to my house. What information do I need to get that to happen? That's what we do. We make information technology so that people can make the right decisions. And if we think about that as designers, if we focus on our task analysis, on our design, on everything that we're doing, and we ask ourselves the question, what decision is my user trying to make? And what information do they need in order to make that decision? We will simply be better designers. Because at the end of the day, that's all they're doing. And I also too want pad thai, right? And I'll also say cookies. And now everybody wants cookies. So here's some war stories about being right. These are things that I personally have experienced and situations I've personally been in. And these, I'd say, are probably the three most impactful experiences of my professional career. And I'm showing this because I don't just want this to be about YouTube videos that I found randomly on online, but I want this to be a bit of a personal story as well. So, war story number one: prepare, practice, and do it again. Right? We talked about training. We talked about that. I was working at Smart Technologies. Remember, I said not really mission and life critical. Working with Mike Rounding and a few other people on this call. And we made smart boards, and they're big displays, they're interactive, you can put all sorts of stuff on it. But what they're really good at is showing a lot of information really big. So the Calgary Fire Department added a smart board to their mobile command unit, and this is the actual vehicle I'm talking about. And I had the opportunity to go to one of their training exercises and observe. And my role in that was twofold. One, see how we could make our technology better for what they needed. But two, advise and consult the CFD on how they could best leverage our technology in those scenarios. And I watched them do this training exercise, and they went through it. It took about 3 hours. They created a situation, right? They were talking to people. They had the exercise was how to best communicate the real-time information, right? And their goal was to access as much relevant information as possible, disseminate to who they needed to. So it was a full-on both situational awareness and command and control situation. We talked about several ways that they could better use our technology. And what they did is through the exercise, the commander was working with the training officer that was in the vehicle, and they were updating their playbook for that particular scenario as we were developing out the scenario to leverage the smartboard and our Bridget communication technology at the time. It was all great, but here's the fun part. This was exactly 2 weeks before the 2013 floods, and the training scenario was a 100-year flood. I had the privilege of watching them prepare for what might happen, then seeing it happen and seeing the end result, which arguably by all measures was a phenomenal job by our first responders. Sadly, we lost 2 lives during that time and a lot of property, but it could have been a hell of a lot worse had these folks not been prepared and not put this plan into action when they needed to. So your users prepare for scenarios, even in a commercial environment. We have the ability to leverage that training and that preparation in our design. War story number 2, rinse, repeat, practice, and decide. So again, I'm doing ethnography, right? I'm sitting with the monkeys, right? I'm in a reading room with a radiologist in Chicago. It's late. We've both been there for, like, I showed up at like 6 a.m. and it's like the night shift now. I'm tired. This guy's been there, I don't know, 8-10 hours. He's exhausted by now. And he's in front of these 4 very bright monitors in a dark room. His eyes are shot. He's used an entire case of sustained eye drops because they're looking at these monitors all day, right? He brings up a patient's MRI, and within 10 seconds, he goes, this guy's not going to make it. He's just, and I look at him and I'm like, and he was just deadpan, dead face. He's a guy, he's not going to make it. I said, oh, okay. So he spent the rest of, I think it was about 4 minutes, 3.5, 4 minutes, looking at all the rest of the images to confirm his diagnosis, did his report, submitted it, and moved on to the next study. And I said, doctor, I'm really, really shocked. I mean, the first couple images that came up, you knew. He goes, yeah, man. He says, yeah, it was fast. My first one, and I'll never forget these words. My first one. So this one, how did he say? This one took 10 seconds, but my first one took 10 years. So I want to bring this back to what I said about these folks. They are trained to be right. And they drill and they practice and they know immediately they are right. They know immediately they are right. This is a very important characteristic that I want you guys to take with you as designers. When you're working with people in these kinds of environments or people at higher levels that have been highly successful and are highly experienced, you may be trying to convince them that your design is better than their idea. They might have said, no, the button should go over here. Or this information is not critical, get rid of it. And you might go, but. You'll have a hard time convincing them of your idea because they have been trained to be right. They have processed, analyzed, decided, and they've moved on to the next thing. And you're going to have to bring them back from that decision. These people are decision makers. When they tell you something, it's a decision that they've made. So show up with information that they might not have, because that is the best way to influence their decision. And the last one, this one, I'll never forget so long as I live. I'm in, I think, Iowa City, Iowa. Mike remembers this time. We had just deployed our radiology solution throughout the hospital. And the way McKesson worked is we would do 6 weeks of preparation for deployment. We would show up on a Thursday with all of the computers that were needed in the hospital. We would rip out all of the light boxes, all of these film boxes here in the hospital, install computers where they were, and by Sunday, the whole hospital had gone digital. We'd convert them from film to digital in 4 days. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Yeah, 4 days. And then we would sit at the site in all the locations. We'd send a whole team, and we would support the users who had been through some training sometimes, were about to start their training, usually, and support them while they were doing their jobs. So I'm in the ER, Iowa City, Iowa. Again, I'm covering the night shift. It's late. I'm tired. They're tired. And there was a new patient in the ER that had come in, and this particular hospital had a habit of every trauma patient that comes in, they do imaging on them, right? Then those images go to a radiologist. Radiologist reads them, sends the report. That patient starts crashing, right? Their stats start dropping. Doctors rush into the room or the bed. I don't even remember. And the doctor's preparing to start CPR. He's yelling out instructions to his staff. And he goes, where the hell are this guy's images? Do we have them yet? I need the images. Have they been read? And they look at me because I'm the guy that's closest to the computer. I'm there to support. And he goes, I need the images. So Raul puts his hot little hands on the computer and goes to get this guy's images, right? I've never been so scared of something in my life. I had to contribute to this person's welfare. And it really, really opened my eyes to, because I got to feel it. And that's the whole point of ethnography, right? Be there, experience it, live it. I got to live on a real emergency situation that depended on me. The takeaway I want you guys to take away from here is get the hell out of the office, go see the monkeys, go live with them, see what they're doing, sit down with them, just watch, be there, feel it, smell it, experience it. That's going to be the biggest learning that you can have. So, some key takeaways from these experiences. Number one, training. When the shit hits the fan, we rely on what we know best. That's who we are as humans, right? The better trained we are for any situation, right? Whether it's, I don't know, picking up our kids from school or, you know, getting groceries or whatever, the more we know, the more we are going to be able to handle whatever comes our way. That's why we take classes to drive, right? A Canadian soldier goes through 9 months of training before they're deployed. It's called the road to high readiness. And they are prepared for going out in the field, in the theater, right? Doctor goes through years and years and years of practice, and they're put through hell. They're put through 24, 48-hour shifts where they don't get to sleep so that they are prepared for situations like what happened in the ER that day. We as designers, and I said this a bit earlier, we can rely on the training that they have. When we start a design task, get the training manual, read it, talk to the trainer, ask the person what training they received. What school did they go to? So here's something, another thing I experienced in radiology. When images are displayed for radiology, there is an order that they follow, right? It's anatomical, and they're not just randomly put up, right? It's this side, then that side, or this view, then that view. Depending on which school you went to in the United States, you either like them one way or another. And I was lucky enough to learn this because I talked to some of the trainers, and they knew this and they told me. So we designed for it. Thankfully, there were only two ways, but we were able to leverage that in our design. Now, what happens when there's no training material, which, you know, banking software, commercial software, skip the dishes, there's no training material. But what do our users know? This is where our personas come in, right? You already know how to do personas. But I want you to think about, what are the tools they use most? What do they know the best, the most how to do, right? Design for that. Copy that. Copy, right? Standards and best practices, and this is why I say you got to copy it. Everything these systems are built around are standards, best practices. And why? Because they're proven to work, right? ISO, the International Standards Organization, I can't remember the term for it. It has standards for everything, right? The gas fitting for my barbecue, that is a standard. Every part that's made for it fits that standard. Why? Because it's safe. The biggest takeaway here that I want you guys to take is, as designers, we need to embrace standards. We need to embrace best practices and stop bloody inventing, right? Eloisa is laughing her butt off right now. She's heard me say this 1,000,000 times, right? Stop inventing. Nobody cares, right? Faye is laughing too, because your invention might not be right. It might not work. It's not proven, right? Invention is solving a problem that hasn't been solved. That's the definition of invention. Innovation is solving a problem that has been solved in a new way, right? So only invent a new design pattern if you've gone through all of the others and proven that they won't work, that they're not right. And lastly, performance. Our technology has to be fast, right? Within a minute and a half, that situation changed. Those guys in the HQ had to punch in all that new information that came in over the radio and disseminate it out. We have to make our stuff work fast. And you might say, well, I'm not the programmer, right?
Yeah.
But your design dictates how much information the programmer has to pull. Your design dictates what UI library or what system resources are going to be consumed, right? One of the things that we covered in that curve is that the early designs of our software were a single page application. All of our buttons, all of our controls were in one tab in the browser, and they consumed a ton of memory. As designers, we could break up our application into multiple tabs, right? And that would minimize system resources. So as a designer, have honest conversations with your developers about, is my design causing this thing to slow down? Am I asking for too much when I pre-filter the results? Am I slowing things down? This is where we as designers can make serious inroads, not only in the quality of our designs and the performance of our system, but in our relationships with our developers. Bringing them into that conversation early makes them our friends and makes their lives a hell of a lot easier. And we got to listen.
Can I ask a question here?
Absolutely. This is exactly where I was going to pause and open the floor to questions before we move on.
Yeah, it's a big question that's becoming like 3 and you kind of answered, but still. So in the discussion of the design idea with a person that's trained to be right, or a person that has worked there good enough that knows most of the things, how do you balance between respecting their expertise versus the possibility of identifying a suboptimal existing workflow process? As a designer, you already talked to the trainer, so you have a discovery. How you...
Excellent question, Eloisa. That question is actually even more difficult to solve, and Kristen will know this. When the person you're talking to is the person in charge in a hierarchical military organization or any kind of hierarchical organization. When that person says jump and people say how high, they told you something, they expect you to listen. One strategy I found that works for me is to remind them that you don't know, like you are there for a very specific thing, to make sure that your technology is the best thing for their soldiers and that you don't fully understand why this is not a good solution. Ask them to take you down the path of how they got to that decision, right? So we've often, many of you have heard me talk about the 5 whys, right? Why this? Okay, well, why that? Well, why that? I think that is a very good strategy, and remind them, look, I don't know what you know, right? And I've been brought in here because I do know some things that you don't know, right? I know how to make technology. Most soldiers don't. That's why we're there to collaborate, right? Explain your position, bring data, bring facts to the conversation, not feelings, right? Soldiers, doctors, nurses, they don't care about feelings. They only care about what the patient is feeling. They don't care about yours, right? They put their feelings aside to do what they need to do, right? But you got to bring the facts. Hey, look, if I do it this way, it's going to be an extra click. And that click takes 40 milliseconds. How fast does a bullet travel, right? 40 milliseconds is a long time. If we do it this way, then there's extra information to be processed or another screen to go through. That's extra time, right? Bring that to the conversation, but then have them explain how they got to that decision. Because you might be missing a piece of information that is critical to your design, right? That they know that you don't. Like, hey, there's 2 schools in the US that teach you to look this way or that way, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. Data, show them your discoveries. Totally.
Looks like we have some other stuff.
Okay, yeah. Well, Stephen is mentioning that to everyone, also actively encourage to developers to work with the challenge of your designs. Otherwise, a lot of developers will just take your designs and try their best to implement them. And if they're not solving the problem at hand, and they might know things too.
Yeah,
Mike,
it's a great point, Stephen. And Stephen and I worked together at Curve Dental. For those who don't know, Stephen was the VP of engineering, and we were close collaborators and counterparts there. And this is a discussion we had a lot, right? Sometimes developers think their job is to take the spec and implement the spec. The job goes past that, right? Everyone's job is to ask questions, ask why. It's the most important thing we can know, why, right? And we as designers, we have to be open to that line of questioning. And we have to, again, bring the facts, bring the information, bring the data to the table. Especially with developers, highly logical, highly analytical. They care about facts and data.
totally agree. The other question, I will pass the microphone to Mike. So he makes his question.
Was it the other thing I sent you?
Yeah, the controversial one.
Okay, a little bit of a controversial question. As a designer, we hunger for, I'm a very research-focused designer. So, but as a designer, as I say, we hunger for information so that we're building the right product. That can lead to analysis paralysis. How do you know where to draw the line between knowing you're right and knowing you're right enough?
What an interesting question. I think the question comes into not stripping away, but building towards. We as designers, and I have encouraged my teams, many of you on this call, think broad. What is the end goal that we want? And let's work backwards from there. Another way to address that is, this is the end goal. What is the absolute minimum? And this is something, maybe an understanding I've come through as I've evolved from or transitioned from UX to product management. What is the MVP? The minimum viable product, right? And that starts with, well, what's not viable? What's not enough? Where do we know that, look, if I don't give them this piece of information, they can't get their job done? So one of the core things to look at is your task analysis. What are they trying to do? What is the end goal? Well, the end goal is to communicate the location of a hostile force. Okay, if I give them this one piece of information, a location, a GPS coordinate, is it enough? Well, no, because that could be a hostile force, that could be a tree in a field, that could be whatever. Okay, well, if I give them a GPS location and a word, hostile or friendly, is that enough? Oh, yes, it is. Job done, goal achieved. In consumer technology, we then ask the question, well, how do we delight? That's the next level, right? When I got to pay a bill, do I have what I need to pay the bill? Okay, what would delight me is to know that that bill has been received by the payee, right? So I think it's, ask yourself the question, what is the goal? Start with the minimal piece of information, ask, does it meet the goal? And stop and build up until you meet the goal. And that might be enough. And then verify, validate, test, test, test.
Yeah, it sounds like it comes down to problem identification. What's the problem you're 100%. Trying to solve? Be laser focused on it. Have I solved it?
100%. 100%.
And prioritization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Otherwise, you may be overwhelming, right? That doctor in that trauma situation, what is the thing that they need to know? They ask for, there's a term, I can't remember, but you'll hear it in all the shows. When a patient comes in, they ask the nurse to get the tests done, right? The standard body chemistry, CBC, common body chemistry. They'll say, give me the CBC. And those are 5 or 6 measures that give them a general sense of if you're okay, or if there's something foreign in your body, that is causing whatever's going on. And then they go, oh, foreign substance. Let's find the foreign substance. No foreign substance? Okay, mechanical, right?
We have another question that I'm going to pass the microphone to Charles. He has a question for you.
Yeah, for sure. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Hey, Raul. So, in that mapping tool that you showed in that military application, I was just wondering, if you were to design something so streamlined, to minimize the impediment the software is providing for each of those teams that are operating, do you, my first part of the question would be, do you end up developing a piece of software or a tool that's very situation specific, that's not very flexible?
Yeah, you can. You absolutely can, right? And that's where the task analysis and the question that Mike had just asked as well is, do you really understand the problem? And it may be absolutely okay that your tool does one and only one thing.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah. And it may not, but that's like, do you really understand the problem that you're trying to solve?
I guess as a follow-up to that, is it ever possible then, like let's take the alert, for example, you say that the alert to that mapping tool is probably very, very important to keep everyone apprised of the situation that can rapidly change. But the alert that you expose to the user could be very different when they're, let's say, under open gunfire where sound is, it doesn't matter because they're compromised in that point, versus maybe like a covert ops situation where they can't be known, right? Like where that they exist, or how would you design around that kind of a dilemma?
Yeah, so again, it's very problem specific, right? Designing for covert situations is a very different thing. That's something that most of us will never be exposed to. It's very tightly kept. But I will say this. It comes back to a statement I made early on. Your technology does not replace the person, ever. Your technology enables the person. So the question is, when you're designing for that alert, the real question is, how do I need to enable this person who receives the alert? Because they will then go off and take action. They and their buddies will go off and take action, right? I don't know if that really addresses your question, but coming back to the covert scenario, there's all sorts of things that you need to think about in those. Not something I was heavily involved with, but some little things to think about. There's no LEDs on any equipment used by covert people. There's no light emissions. They actually have very minimal stuff with them.
Gotcha.
Less is
that
more.
Helps.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I think we can move on, or you want to answer that? How do you decide critical situation will constitute the alert?
Sorry, which one?
The one that we left pending for Mike. Like, how do you decide in critical situation what constitutes an alert?
Yeah. I'm gonna still come back to that one, and it's really these three things that I talked about: performance, standards, and training. Really comes down to this question: well, why are they important?
Okay, let's keep going.
Why? Right? Remember, my favorite thing is why. Brings me to my first controversial statement, and many of you will have heard this. There is no such thing as intuitive. It does not exist. It's a myth. Whoever told you it exists was a liar. It's a meaningless statement when someone says, oh, your technology is not intuitive, especially about your UI, right? And it's for me, what people who don't understand what they're doing say. Okay? So what is intuition? The definition by Cambridge Dictionary is an ability to understand or know something without needing to think about it. or use reason to discover it, i.e. inspect and analyze, or a feeling that shows this ability, right? I think a really great example is when I'm hanging out with a friend, or, you know, we meet at a bar, I'm sitting down at the table and they show up, I look at them and go, hey, Mike, you feeling okay? That's not me having a feeling. That's me, who knows Mike really, really, really well, observing something that is different about Mike. And that observation happens like that. But it's because I spent a lot of time, I pick on Mike because we've been friends since the 9th grade and we really do know each other really well. None of us is born with the ability to use any technology. Everything we use is learned behavior, and we perceive it as intuitive because we know it really well, okay? What we perceive as intuition is actually what I call instant observation, instant recognition, instant analysis, and an instant decision. I saw Mike, he looked different, shoulders were a little slumped. I decide he may not be feeling well. I see Mike flexing, feels like $1 million, okay? When we design, this is why it's so important to look at standards, their training, okay? What is familiar is immediately recognizable, right? You sit down in a rental car, the steering wheel is round, it's familiar, you know that's how you steer the car, right? When something's not familiar, how discoverable is it? Can I look at it? Can I be aware that it's something that I could interact with? And that's where standards come into play. I may not be familiar with the banking application, but I'm familiar with lists of information. I'm familiar with the terminology that's used, and I can discover how to use it. So how do I apply this to my design process? Again, focus on your personas, seriously dig into the tools that they are using, right? This is critical. What do they already know how to do? Mimic that design, copy the shit out of it, right? I remember, and Mike knows this, we both studied with Saul Greenberg at the University of Calgary. I'll never forget it. Human-computer interaction, first course, first words out of his mouth. He says, if you see something that works, copy it. There's a reason standards work. They've been proven to work, right? So the other thing is listen to the language that your users are using. Use that language in your UI. We all know this, right? And most importantly, and I can't stress this enough, forget icons. Choose words over icons. A picture may be worth 1,000 words, but they're not your words. They are the interpretation of the person looking at that picture, of that icon. There could be cultural differences, there could be age differences, whatever, that lets them interpret it differently. But if we speak the same language, a word has a much better chance of communicating your message. And as a designer, you communicate information, you communicate the message, choose words. So I use this example here. How did I find that patient's images quickly? One, I knew how to use the software. Okay, I designed it. But two, I knew we were in the ER. The system was pre-configured for the ER, and we used the word stat priority studies. All those, the patients that came into the ER, they were stat priority. So I could get rid of all the thousands of other studies going on and focus on just 54. And then there were other criteria that I could narrow that down. Okay. And this is another key one. Understand the context of where your tool is being used, right? So to the question that Charles asked, is it a covert situation or is it a critical or not? Pre-build filters, settings, etc. for those contexts. Have the awareness in your application of where your user is, okay? And apply standards. Questions before I move on to the next controversial statement?
I don't have new questions, so.
Okay. So what's the most difficult thing about designing for this space? It's empathy. Empathy is one of the core tenets of design thinking, right? And that's what we as designers are trying to do. We are trying to build empathy. We're trying to understand and feel what our users feel. Empathy is not sympathy. Sympathy is understanding the feeling. Empathy is feeling it, right? Most of us have not been to war, will not go to war, do not come from a conflict zone, right? Thank God. We haven't had someone's life in our hands. If you have, I'm very sorry. We have not made life or death decisions. If you have, I'm very sorry. We don't have the foundation to have that feeling. Let alone, we've never had it, let alone do we do it daily, and let alone do we do it when we're physically, emotionally, and mentally drained, right? We will not experience it, but we can come close. And as evidence, I propose this statement, controversial statement number 2. Each and every single one of us in this moment right now is disabled. Let that sink in for a second. You might be going, wait, hold on, me? No, I'm perfectly fine. You are not. You are disabled. Evidence. I'd like to throw this out there. I thought I'd incorporate some memes after the military vehicles to lighten the mood. When we are tired, and many of you have probably experienced this coming home to your significant other, honey, what do you want for dinner? Oh my God, what are you asking me to make this decision for? I can't make this decision right now. When we are tired, when we are exhausted, even the smallest decision can be too much to process. Okay? We may be physically encumbered at any moment in time. I encourage you, next time you log into your computer with your keyboard, do it with your bag or your purse over one shoulder and try to type your password. How many of you have walked into a Starbucks with your bag on your shoulder, opened the door, got your coffee, and then had to open the door holding your bag and holding your coffee cup? Right? And the beautiful example is, I'm bringing all the groceries to the door. I'm a superhero. I got everything out of the car, but I can't get my keys to open the door. This is a beautiful one. For those of you that have kids, you have priorities, and they take priority over everything else. Some tasks that our users do are only ever done after everything else that they have to do. How many of you who have kids pay the bills after they go to sleep? Right? I'm willing to bet a nice bottle of wine that a lot of you do that as a habit, simply because that's when you have time to do it. How many of you have forgotten to do it after you put the kids to bed just because you were too darn tired? Right? This is just human nature. We may be at a disadvantage because of our lack of knowledge or our environment. We may be disabled by those things. So I love this meme. Oh, English is your second language? Well, I'm going to talk really, really, really fast so you only get every second word. Right? Now, that's just simply a fact of the world that we live in, right? I speak 3 languages. 2 of them I don't speak very well. When I'm in those environments speaking those languages, I miss a lot of stuff. Even though I speak English perfectly, it could be really loud and I just didn't hear what you said. Or my phone went off, right? I'm on a phone call and beep, oh, I missed what you said. We get interrupted and we miss things all the time. Now, here's another one that I want to focus on here, and this is something I learned in my previous company. I was with Catapult Technology. We made investment software for investment banks, and our development team was in Serbia. Our users may not have the context or the background to understand the task. For those of you that might be from Eastern Europe, I'm from Romania. I'm from Eastern Europe, getting a loan is not part of the culture. It's something that most people simply won't ever do and don't have the context to understand. Making investments is not part of the culture. It's something that a lot of people won't do. So our developers who didn't have access to this in their personal lives couldn't understand the context of the software we were trying to build. We had to do a lot to teach them that context. This is how loans work. This is how you pay back loans. This is how investments work. This is when you can and cannot make investments. As designers, we have to ask ourselves, do our users have the background to understand that context? Does our team have the background to understand the context? And in a lot of cases, forget whether it's cultural or not, we're building tools for things that we ourselves won't experience, right? I was building dental software. I never ran a dental practice. Yes, I had been for cleanings and x-rays. But we as designers have to teach the people around us what the context is. And my absolute personal favorite is this one. Sometimes noise is just too much to handle. How many of you have done this? You're pulling into a parking lot, you're looking for an address, you turn down the volume so you can see where you're going better. I do it all the time, all the time. So the question here is, are you overwhelming the user in that task? Is this thing critical right now? Do they really need to deal with it? And the beautiful example is, I'm paying a bill and I get a credit card offer in my banking software, right? I don't need a credit card offer right now. I need to pay my bill and know that I got enough for groceries tomorrow, right? So when we think about disability, it's a physical or mental condition that limits a person's movements, senses, or activities, and as a result, our ability to make decisions. And remember, we do information technology that enables people to make decisions. Ultimately, it's something that prevents us from operating at 100%. And I encourage you as designers to start your design process saying, my user is not ever 100% engaged with my technology, 100% capable of using my technology, or in any way, shape, or form interested in using my technology. It's a distraction. So how do I make it work in that scenario? I'm going to pause there for a second because I know there's probably going to be some questions about this one or some comments.
Well, it has been a few comments in the everyone channel, like now we're discovering that it's normal to turn down the volume.
Yes, Charles, you are perfectly normal. You are as human can be.
I was really glad that you brought up empathy, Raul, because I think that that's something that's you don't just learn that at school, right? It's a interpersonal interaction. It's I don't know, like for example, like as I'm getting older, I feel I am getting more empathetic just because I have more life experience. And I think it's underrated to put yourself in those people's shoes and think like that. So even though you think your statement's controversial, like I'm right on board with you.
Awesome. I agree. Look, I've said this before. I've asked the question, and I'll ask the question to the group. What is user experience? Or what is the user experience when we talk about our user? It's a very interesting thing that I've asked this of the UX community, and there's silence on the line. I didn't come up with this definition. I heard it, and I wish I could quote the author, but I don't know where it came from. But I think it hits the nail on the head. User experience is the feeling that a user is left with after using a product or a service. That's what user experience is. It's 100% about feelings. Do I feel satisfied after paying that bill? Do I feel confident? Do I feel frustrated? Right? I'm sitting in front of my computer 8 hours a day and I can't get my job done because this software sucks. Now my boss is going to yell at me because my job isn't done. I'm so frustrated. User experience is all about what we feel after we use the product. So we as designers are responsible for creating that feeling. And if we don't feel it ourselves, we'll never be able to do it. There was another question on the line here from Patrick. Is there a situation where too many words make it too difficult to process the layout? Or is this something where we just have to be better designers to figure out? There's 100% a situation where too many words reduce the quality of your design. And there are situations where not enough words reduce the quality of your design. In his book, Don't Make Me Think, I think it's Krug, he has a chapter on writing for the internet. I think you guys just read that chapter. It's brilliant. It says, when you write for the internet, write your paragraph, then remove half the words, but preserve the message, then remove half the words again and preserve the message. This is something I practice when I send my emails and even when I do my designs. It's a wonderful strategy for saying what you need to say in the smallest amount of words without losing the message. There's another show where I think it's great for people to watch on Netflix, Abstract, the Art of Design. In the first episode, the guy that they're following says, abstraction is the art of removing information while preserving message. And that's something that you can apply to your visual design, your iconography as well. How do you make the simplest icon that communicates the message? So.
Here's another question. While testing a prototype on a critical scenario, how far did you go as replicating the context mental space the user is in?
Yeah, we as designers and as contractors in that scenario will have a very hard time of actually doing that. Those are very controlled situations where they have actual people whose job it is to put soldiers in that scenario and doctors in that scenario. For example, somewhere around Edmonton, and maybe Kristen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, there's a training facility that is set up where they hire actors. They paint them up in blood and guts and gore, and it's like a Hollywood movie set. And soldiers go there to train, so they're ready for battle. We may not be able to, but try to always put a scenario in front of them, right? If it's as real life as possible, even better. Get scenarios from the trainers, because trainers have those training scenarios, and you can use those. Yeah.
Thank you. And yeah, Maya is putting a comment that, I mean, I work in the software dental management. Yeah, so I like his comment about less and how he turned off the software so he can go to manual process to focus on getting it right. So that is giving me a good information for my design.
Awesome. Well, Maya, I'm really interested in hearing that. Maybe we can talk about that at the end. We're nearing the end here, guys, so we'll open the floor for more discussion. And Nikita, to add to this point, I transitioned from law enforcement before coming to UX. I don't know how this aspect of replicating the context mental space could be achieved. I say this because everyone reacts and thinks differently in these types of situations. A very good point, right? And that's where I think it's you know, as we know, you can't just test with one user. You got to test with multiple, right? You got to pick your sample size, pick your demographic, right? Cover the spectrum as much as you can. Another thing about a lot of these contexts is that, especially with soldiers in specialized tasks, they have physical and mental characteristics that are guaranteed to be there. So pilots don't wear glasses, right? Pilots are never colorblind, right? There's other things that maybe you can leverage to help inform your design, but also remove some of the things that you need to test for.
This reminds me to you three expertise users: beginner, intermediate, and expert.
Yeah.
That's a good reminder to that too.
That's right. That's right. Okay, so let's move on to the next thing, which is I think we've been kind of leading to it. So how do I apply this? You know, how do I get to this empathy? How do I do that without going to war or, you know, becoming a surgeon, right? Controversial statement number 3, design for yourself. You are the user. What? Kristen's mind is just blown. The Usability Professionals Association's motto is know thy user, for it is not you. They are wrong. It is you. Because all people are fundamentally the same. We all have a brain, we all have a heart, we all have a head, 2 arms, 2 legs, a torso, fundamentally the same. We all love our children, we love our family, we love our friends, we all want the same thing, right? Maslow's hierarchy of need applies universally. So while you will not be able to truly experience what these people experience, through ethnography, you can be there in some situations. When it comes to physical, mental, and emotional encumbrance or disability, you can get close enough for a smoke test. You can make yourself exhausted. Think of yourself on the worst day of your life. Really relive that moment. Think of yourself on the most exhausted moment of your life and really relive that moment. Truly introspect on your physical, emotional, and mental state in that moment. Then look at your design and ask yourself, could I have processed this on that day? Could I have understood that on that day? And this is really, really important, not just in mission and life critical systems, but also in consumer technology, right? We are now approaching a world where everything is moving online. People are making decisions from their homes, paying bills through their banking app, ordering food online. Some of those decisions that they are making may not be that easy. Do I pay the phone bill this month or do I get groceries? There's a significant portion of the Canadian population that has to make that decision on a monthly basis. A lot of those people may be using your technology. A lot of those people may not have access to get to the bank on a regular basis to pay that bill. So they had to buy a mobile phone or a computer or whatever to be able to do that. You can imagine what these people are going through by thinking of some of the toughest moments in your life, reliving those, playing back those moments in your head, and then looking critically at your design. Pause there for questions.
Another factor to add on to that is if you are in one of those situations and you react a certain way, and if you're in a similar situation again, there's no guarantee that you're going to react the same way. The first time could have traumatized you and you act totally different or whatever reason. So that makes it even harder.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So controversial statement number 4, always test your own designs. Right? There's a big debate in the UX community of, should I test my own designs? Can I be impartial? Can I be unbiased? Be biased. I want you to really latch on to your designs. I want you to care about it so deeply and then go watch your users use it and watch it fail. I want you to feel that pain yourself. Because if somebody else is testing for you, you will never feel the pain of your design failing. And that will teach you more about how to design than anything else. Watching your users use your design that you put your heart and soul into and it fail and fail miserably. You have to feel that pain. You have to put yourself in that situation. Test your own designs. And really it is, in my opinion, one of the greatest ways to build empathy is to be there to watch them fail, especially for something that you've latched onto so much. So be biased, latch on, then go test it. And we can talk next time, see how you feel about that. So I'm going to do one thing before I leave you with some closing comments and open the floor to conversation. I know we've been going on for a while here. I'm going to give you homework. And I expect you all to do it. Eloisa, have you done it yet? Faye, have you done it yet? Mike, I asked Eloisa and Faye to do this. Find out if they've done it yet. I want you all to go out and read these documents. The Apple Human Interface Guidelines, the Google Material Guidelines, the Microsoft Human Interface Guidelines, MIL Standard 1472H, the Department of National Defense Design Criteria Standard for Human Engineering, which is a wonderful document that Kristen knows backwards and forwards and
almost off by heart.
Almost off by heart, but it tells you things like the optimal size of a button in a touch environment should be 9 by 9 millimeters for accurate touch targeting. Read the FAA human guidelines. So the Federal Aviation Administration, they have guidelines on designing for pilots, right? The military guideline is anthropometric, physical, psychological guidelines for designing software and hardware for the military. Samsung user interface guidelines, they're One UI. The United States CDC has an anthropometric reference data for children and adults that says how big or small people are. I want you guys to go read these and others, because these are the standards that dictate how we use information technology today. And these are the standards we should be designing to. Which brings me to controversial statement number 4. If you practice TLDR and you think that's too much to read, quit your damn whining and step up. Doctors, nurses, soldiers make time to prepare for their jobs. Make time to know their best practices and their standards. They sacrifice, they push themselves past the point of what they're capable of. They take on more than their fair share. If you can't bring yourself to read some documents, you can't be in this business. I'm sorry. It's a long document. Deal with it. RTFM. We all know this, right? Read it again, then read it again. Commit it to memory. Know it inside and out. Do that for the training materials, the procedures, etc., that you get from your users. Step up. And the reason you should do this, they need you to make technology. They can't do it themselves. They need you to make the tools that they use to save lives. And in closing, I'm going to leave you with just a summary here. You may not be working on mission critical stuff, but your technology is important. It is necessary. Somebody depends on it. Your users are never fully engaged with it, no matter how much they depend on it. Start with thinking about how they feel mentally, physically, emotionally. Put yourself in that situation. Analyze the task you're designing for. Know the problem. Know the goal. Know what you're trying to achieve. And above all else, question, question, question. Why for everything that you do. Thank you.
I think we all want to clap.
It's possible to clap. I guess not to close the microphone, but thank you so much, Raul. It's been
my pleasure.
Fantastic. And wow, I feel like it's been 5 minutes and 5 years at the same time. I learned so much and time has flown.
Yeah, I apologize for keeping everyone here for almost 2 hours. But
keep on going, you know, just yeah, this is kind of like this is exactly the feeling I had when I met you, right? It's like, please tell me more, you know, and I had so many questions that you already addressed, and at the same time, I know that there will be some more to let maybe will surface once we start, let's say, digesting everything that you have shared with us. Yeah, thank you for sharing your social media and your email. What would be the best way to reach you, and what would you prefer when
Yeah, any way, guys. I mean, email is great. I'm very active on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way for us to connect and stay connected. I don't do a lot on Twitter and Instagram and all that stuff. I typically use that for more personal stuff, but LinkedIn and email is the best. Feel free to send me questions if you have them afterwards. I'm going to stick around here for anyone that wants to stay in chat as well. It'd be great to catch up with some old friends. And I will also say this, for those of you that are in Calgary, one of the problems with Calgary is that we're not very vocal and advertise the things that we do, but there are a lot of things going on here, a lot of companies that are building this type of technology and doing really amazing work in these spaces. I encourage you to look out for these companies and join them, right? If you want to be great at UX, you have to solve the hard problems. You have to take on the hard tasks. And they are out there and they need people like you. Go out, look for it, apply yourself to it. You can do it.
I totally agree. And actually, one of the biggest problems I encounter is when I get to talk to some of these companies, they maybe have heard of design, but they are like, well, we don't know where to find them, we don't know who they are, and we don't know where to get to. And it's really frustrating because at the same time, I get to hear quite a lot of designers. It's like, hey, I cannot find a job. And just, guys, come on. There has to be a way where you can get together.
Yeah.
And yeah, when there's no designer around, you can tell. So we're not helping. We're not helping if we are not out there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And look, it comes down to the classic problem, right? How do we get people to value design? I think let's change the question. How do we get people to feel what our users feel? How do we generate empathy, right? And we are storytellers. We can go out and we can tell that story, right? We can find examples. We can make people see and feel what our users are feeling. And that's, I encourage you guys to do that. It's okay to shed a tear once in a while in the design world.
Only one?
Eloisa, there's a drought going on. We got to conserve our water.
Yeah, okay.
Wait, you're not supposed to cry every day? What's that?
It's okay to cry every day?
Yeah, that might be a management issue. I'm just saying. Stephen, call HR.
Well, I just remembered your daily word that you used to say to me, embrace. Every time that my face was like, what is next? The first word would come out is like, embrace. Whatever I need to do to move on, so.
Yeah, and it's, it really comes down to, for my perspective on UX and design and products is clearly influenced by 15 years working on this type of technology, right? And being in situations where I see the struggle that people go through, feeling it myself in a very, very, very small way and having it scare me, right? Those, to me, are the things that matter, right? So when we hit our challenges in our day-to-day design tasks and the things that we're doing, right, and we get frustrated and whatever, we need to rush in head first to those because, these users, our soldiers, our doctors, our nurses, all these folks, they don't run away from a challenge. They run right towards it, and they're the first ones there. So I think we can be like them when it comes to what we do on a daily basis. Yeah. So I never answered Mike's question. I'm going to come back to it. It comes back to my thing about intuitive, right? There's no such thing as intuitive.
Do you want to recap? Or
yeah, go ahead. Well,
okay, hang on, I'm finding it.
Yeah.
You type something and you forget it.
That's why we write things down so we can get them off our heads.
That's right.
Do you want me to read it? I have it.
Oh, you've got it? Go for it, Louisa.
How do you decide in a critical situation what constitutes an alert?
No, it was a different one. Different question. It was the one after that.
I have it here too.
Yes.
The video in the trauma or technology in trauma video. How much do they think about what technology do I have available to me how does it relate to helping this person?
The answer is they don't think. Remember what I said. It's all about being able to look at something, immediately recognize it, and not think. They need to be able to look at the thing that's in front of them and know exactly what it is without thinking. So to answer your question, literally, they don't think. They don't think about technology at all.
They've had the training to understand these are the tools available to me. I see what's in front of me. That's the tool.
That's it. That's it, right? Get a crash cart, scalpel, suture, right? X-ray, boom, they know what they have. And it is, like perceived intuitive, but it's actually perceived instinctual. We're at the point, these folks, and many of us in the things that we do, like, do you think about putting the car into park? No, you put it into park. Did you think about the chair you sat in today? No, you sat down because you know it really, really well. And that comes from practice, familiarity, right? Immersing, having it around you at all times, and training.
There was this question that I wanted to share, but they're not exactly about the projects itself, but about the people that makes the projects happen. And certainly when you have a situation where, a potential scenario could cause serious damage, and you're the designer, right? You get to hear and be in touch with those users, but quite a lot of the other stakeholders or developers or product owners could not be in the same room as the users. In your experience, what have been the shared characteristics of a successful team that makes a project really work for these kind of scenarios?
Yeah, I think one of the core ones is communication and information sharing, right? One of the most unhealthy, toxic behaviors that a team can have is information hoarding. Mm-hmm. And we as UXers, again, we are storytellers, right? We got to come back and tell people, look, this is what I saw. This is what happened. This is what we need to do. And most importantly, above all else, this is why. If we do this, then that. For these reasons, we cannot do this, that, and the other, or this could happen. We have to focus on the why. And I don't think it's as much the team makeup as it is the habit of information sharing and just being fully open, honest, fully transparent about what we know, and taking the time to actually process that, right? I ended my last controversial statement with, if you practice TLDR, you're not right for this business. Complex situations often can't be summarized quickly. We have to have the patience to really engage in that conversation. Take the time to process all the information, right? And if you couldn't be bothered to read the thing or to listen to the presentation or to watch the video, you could be causing serious consequences. You could be causing death. And in an environment where you're building critical stuff, that kind of behavior gets weeded out pretty quickly. Because the people that have gotten you to, like, you join a company that's already building military technology, well, they've been successful for a reason, and they know what's important, right? Health technology that's been successful, they know what's important. Where you can really influence is if you're joining a startup that doesn't truly know. That's where you can really come in and be that voice, right? If you look at Calgary, there's a lot of medical startups, a lot of medical technology startups. The majority of them are started by doctors. Talk to the doctor, find out why they did it, find out what's important, communicate that person's message.
Fantastic.
Doctors are taught how to communicate with the patient, with their staff, and with the patient's family, not with teams of technology developers. You can be that voice.
That makes sense. And I guess that puts some pressure on us to practice active listening and really great documentation skills.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And also have a good requirements and design spec.
That's right, Jeff. That's right. So get to typing.
He's not in that business anymore. It's fine.
We also had the pleasure of working with Jeff at Curve, or I did. Jeff is still with Curve. Mike.
It's always a pleasure.
He's Faye, Jeff, all the Curve team.
Wow. Well, what can I say? It's been amazing, and yeah, I'm not really closing the channel or the conversation. I just want to take a couple of seconds to introduce the next events. And yeah, if somebody else wants to remain online, we can stay as long as you want. I think this is one of the most home-like feeling I have from a event. So I'm going to just share my screen one tiny bit, and let me see if I can find where to share that. Well, okay, I don't know why I cannot find the button. Okay, all right, sorry. Okay, so I'm going to just share one event that is happening in September. We are going to stay, we're going to restart kind of like the rest of the year in September, and this is going to be an event online. So far, everything is going to be online until we understand better how things are going to go. This is going to be unique ways of prototyping, and we're going to have Thomas Girard, and he's going to introduce us about how to simplify prototyping so we can have a much more fluent flow. Also, during this September too, we are going to have the UX Summit. And yeah, if you haven't really been on one of these events, they're happening overnight because they're in Asia. And it's amazing. They have a really fantastic layout, and the speakers are top notch. I think last time I couldn't go to bed until 4 a.m. in the morning. So they have been kind enough to do it during the weekend. So I guess we are going to have some opportunity to recover. And almost coincidentally, the same weekend, we had the design conference by learners. And in case you didn't know, we are partnering up with them. So we're going to start bringing up quite a lot of the goodness that they have from the user research side, and quite a lot of the experience that they have provided when it comes to creating the community. And yeah, they're really fantastic. So if you also have the opportunity, yeah, you can spend the whole weekend just learning about UX and getting everything that most of the time is really hard to get. You know, it's just quite a lot of amazing people in one single place. And yeah, please stay in touch. You know, if this is the first time you have been in the community, we are welcoming. We welcome you all the time, and it doesn't matter if you are a designer or if you're not part of Calgary. You are welcome. And yeah, be part of the conversation. You know, most of the time, actually, the hardest part is trying to see or foresee what the community needs. So if you have an idea or suggestion, please raise your hand. Any channel is open. Just reach out on LinkedIn, Slack, or any opportunity. Just share with us what do you think we need, because at the end of the day, we're building something for you, right? So we have to accommodate on everybody's needs. All right, and that's pretty much the end of my introductions and comments and events. So yeah, please, now the room is open for anybody to continue, and I couldn't be more happy of seeing so many known faces, and I hope one of these days we can get to see each other in one room.
I didn't realize Olivier was here. Hey, Olivier.
Yeah.
You call a Curve.
Man, is nobody working at Curve today? What's going on?
On, it's after hours.
It's 9 o'clock at night.
But you got that team in Scotland now. You gotta support them.
It's their turn. We'll take over in the morning.
That's it.
Right on. Well, I'm not leaving either. I'm around for discussions for anyone that's wants to stay around. I just really want to thank you all for attending and giving me the opportunity to share this with you. And thank you to Luis and the rest of the organizers for setting this up and doing such a great job with the Calgary UX group. And I look forward to all of the upcoming sessions.
No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And just so everybody knows, I'm going to stop the recording. So if you want to relax, some languages are not going to be on record anymore. So
yeah, we don't need our dumb comments on the recording, do we?
Oh, there'll be some.
No one wants to relive the pain.